Welcome to Dundrum, one of the most picturesque locations in the whole of Northern Ireland. But 800 years ago, this stunning castle was the stronghold of a renegade knight from Somerset. And this castle is built on the stuff of mysteries. Who built it and why? Clearly, there was once much more to Dundrum than these ruins, but nobody knows exactly when it was built, or even what it originally looked like. We'll go underground.
Oh, wow.
Overground.
That is not going to stop the point of this sword.
And fight to the death to reveal this castle's secrets.
Oh, look at that. Ooh, isn't that lovely?
And we're poised and ready for the challenge. County Down, Northern Ireland, 9 a.m. Our mission, pieced together when this castle was built.
They don't make it easy for us, do they?
And what it originally looked like. And barring the odd technical hitch, most of the team are raring to go.
Well, this is all very impressive, but I fancy a cup of Earl Grey.
While the digging team are down there bracing themselves with some early morning fortification, the diehards, the brains of the team, are trying to work out where to put in the first trenches. We're working alongside the guys from Queen's University Belfast this time, so working with Colm is going to make it dead easy for you, isn't it, Francis?
Well, yes. I mean, nothing personal, of course, but we've got a bit of a nightmare of a site here, Tony. I mean, it's this fabulous castle, but to be quite honest, we know very, very little about it.
But we do know some things, don't we, Colm?
We do know some things. Back in the 1950s, when the site became a state care monument, there was some excavation up here in the inner ward, and that did reveal evidence of earlier structures. It may be a campaign fortification belonging to the Anglo-Normans.
The consensus is, between the three of us, that probably what we ought to do is reopen one... You're grimacing.
It is grimacing, it certainly is. Why is it that whenever we come to a site like this, rather than put in our own trenches, first of all, we have to redig someone else's trenches?
The easiest way to do it is to work from a known to an unknown. We know where that trench is. We can then work out from there.
Yeah, and there is another reason, Tony. This is a protected monument, right? We have a limited square meterage that we're allowed to dig, but if we open an earlier trench, that doesn't count.
I never knew that. All these years on Time Team, I never knew that if you reopened someone else's trench, it didn't count as part of your allotted square meterage.
No.
Well, that's persuaded me. Go ahead. Dig them all. Redig everyone. Seriously, though, it's unusual to come to a Norman castle with such little previous excavation. 60 years ago, archaeologists unearthed what they thought could be the earliest phase of the castle. To test the theory, Phil's reopening their trench here. And there's a real sense of urgency to the team.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
Most 12th century Norman castles started life not as stone structures, but as a temporary earthen defence. Fingers crossed Phil might find that in his trench.
Now we're all satisfied that we got it defined. Yeah. We want to empty it out.
Dundrum Castle lies 20 miles south of Belfast, overlooking the gorgeous County Down coast. People have been drawn here for centuries. And as Norman castles go, it's got all the usual ingredients. There's a curtain wall encircling a courtyard, a gatehouse, and a stone keep. So what exactly is the big mystery here?
The mystery is when you actually look at this plan and you look around here, you see that you've got this great big open area up here at the very heart of the castle complex. What we'd be expecting to see would be maybe a stable, granary, maybe a chapel, there'd be maybe a stone hall, There'd be other elements of that story that was going on here in the 12th, 13th century, and they're not here.
You've got the keep.
You have the keep, but again, we don't really know the date of that keep. The original castle may have just comprised an enclosing wall, and that might have been the first phase of activity after the Normans come here.
It does seem to me that the thing that you guys want to work out more than anything else is the chronology.
I think that's absolutely true. I think that what you've got here is this wonderful site, but it is little understood.
Which leaves us with two mysteries to solve. What was once here, and what date are the structures you can still see? There's no stopping Colm as he turns his expert eyes to the standing remains in search of answers. Meanwhile, Time Team's Geophys maestros have been deployed on a mission to locate the castle's missing buildings using ground-penetrating radar. But so far, their fancy technology can't tell the difference between man-made structure and bedrock. Not that Francis has much sympathy.
I would like to see the whole thing done
By the end of day 3.
by the end of day 1.
Such a nice guy.
I know.
As they press on, Time Team's Rakshar Dave is attempting archaeological keyhole surgery.
It's not straight onto bedrock, though, is it?
The castle sits on a natural rocky outcrop. She's testing whether a blob on the geophys is bedrock or structure.
I think even if it is bedrock, you've got to go down at least half a metre to confirm it.
Good job it's a tiny trench, because John isn't really playing the chivalrous knight.
I would offer to help, but you know, we've got these strict rules now.
He's not quite on a par with the legendary Norman knight, who, according to history books, built Dundrum Castle. John de Courcy was born in Somerset. His grandfather had been part of William the Conqueror's entourage. Finbar, what sort of man was John de Courcy? How would you describe him?
Well, there's a very, very good description of him from Gerard of Wales, who was a contemporary chronicler. And he describes him as being fair-haired and tall, with bony and sinewy limbs. His frame was lanky and he had a very strong physique, immense bodily strength and an extraordinary bold temperament.
It's Desperate Dan, isn't it?
Desperate Dan. He was incredibly impressive warrior.
And when was Gerald of Wales writing?
Gerald of Wales had met him, so this is a one-to-one description.
It's funny, isn't it, how that echoed down the ages, because this is from Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper, hundreds of years later. And he uses this character, Lord de Courcy, and says, "Now in the Tower lay the Lord de Courcy, the mightiest arm in England." Was he really thought of in that way, as the mightiest arm in England?
Yes, even when he was alive, the things he was doing were so adventurous that he was regarded as greater than any of the other contemporary knights at the time.
In the mid-12th century, England was under the Norman rule of Henry II. Ireland was made up of warring independent kingdoms. Henry stepped in, sending over Norman knights to restore order and force the Irish to accept him as king. But John de Courcy, who arrived in 1171, was a renegade with bigger ambitions for himself. As the second-born son, he didn't stand to inherit the family fortune. Ireland was his golden ticket.
He was looking for fame, fortune and land. The Normans really wanted land above everything else. But when we first hear of him, he's in Dublin and he's raising an army. And he amasses an army of 300 soldiers and 22 knights and strikes out north. We know that he went up as far as Antrim and he built the castle at Carrickfergus.
So, in a sense, he built a little mini-state here, didn't he?
He built a mini-state. He ran his own affairs. He had his own mint. He made his own coins. And very unusually, and the king mightn't have liked that, he didn't put the king's head on the coin, he put St. Patrick's head on the coins.
For several years, Henry was blissfully unaware of de Courcy's actions, and this desperate Dan rebel lived the life of a self-styled master of the area for 25 years. But why choose Dundrum to make his mark? Landscape archaeologist Stuart Ainsworth has been scouring the area for clues. And now he's back. Francis wants answers.
You need to be able to protect yourself while you're campaigning. You need somewhere that's safe and secure. But you also need somewhere that dominates the landscape around. This choice of hill is absolutely perfect for both those reasons. You've got visibility all the way up this coastline, so you can control shipping, as it were, from here. But also, look at the view all around you. You can see for miles and miles and miles, complete control of this landscape. But people in that landscape, if you've come to conquer, as it were, they can see you up on this hill.
Once here, de Courcy needed to defend himself from the warrior-like and fearsome Irish. So Stuart's next task is to map the castle's defences, while the archaeologists try and work out what de Courcy originally built here and when.
Can I come in down the loose here?
Phil's called in Time Team's pottery guru Paul Blinkhorn to date his first find.
What's a nice big piece?
Oh, look at that. It's all decorated.
Ooh!
Isn't that lovely?
Oh,
Nice-
I'm beginning to feel justified in letting you
Nice
pull it
wavy
out
lines
now.
and glaze. It's definitely medieval. Let's have a little look. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that's Cheshire. That's sort of 13th, 14th century. It's a place called Ashton, just to the north of Chester. They're making this stuff.
Is that the sort of stuff you'd expect to find in Northern Ireland?
You find a lot of English pottery, particularly on the east coast. I mean, it's the supply lines.
And what's that, a jug?
Yeah, it's probably coming up towards the neck of a jug. You've got sort of just at the top of the shoulder, you've got probably have the high flaring neck coming up here, then you have a nice rounded shoulder and a long body going down to the base down there somewhere.
And then big handles on it.
Handles, yeah. Big handles, mate.
This beer jug isn't exactly fine bone china, and it dates to about 1250, half a century after de Courcy had left. So the hunt's still on for finds we can tie to de Courcy and structures that shed light on what he built. Hopefully, John's hot-off-the-press geophys results for the upper courtyard might give us the breakthrough we need. We got the news you're after?
That's quite an entrance, John. It better be worth it, you know.
Of course it's worth it. Look, Jimmy's radar plots. So this is the curtain wall, and well, you can see there's hints of things coming out at that point. I think if you want something along this edge, we should investigate those.
Colm, how does that time with what you've been thinking?
And the question I would want to try and resolve is, are we actually looking at not something that's the medieval period, but maybe the remains of a cashel?
What's a cashel?
Cashel would be a defended stone enclosure dating to the 7th to 10th century.
Wow, that's really early, isn't it? This is totally unexpected. Colm thinks the strange curve on the geophys hasn't got anything to do with the Norman castle. He's got a hunch it could be something hundreds of years earlier. So would you want to put a trench in here?
Oh, most definitely, Tony, yes.
All right, shall I get my little vehicle out of the way?
Yeah.
Like a team possessed, we're wasting no time putting in our third trench. Even John's mucking in. Is it Irish? Is it Norman? High-end archaeology or bargain basement bedrock? We'll find out tomorrow.
Discover the past with exclusive ancient history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians from History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to explore everything from the wonders of Pompeii to the rebellion of Boudica and the mysteries of prehistoric Scotland. Immerse yourself in the captivating stories of this remarkable era by signing up via the link in the description.
Beginning of day 2 here at Dundrum in Northern Ireland, and a pretty grey and overcast day it is. But the weather's not dampening anyone's spirits in our quest to find the original Norman castle here. In her trench, though, Time Team's Tracy Smith is on the hunt for something altogether different. In this area, an intriguing curve on the geophys got the archaeologists hoping we were onto something Irish, predating the Normans.
Oh, Tracy, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think you can definitely say that that structure.
Isn't it? That's fantastic. I mean, it's going down.
Yes.
No sign of any mortar.
Nope. Nope, dry stone by the look of it.
So it's dry stone,
Yeah.
and it seems to have a gentle curve on it.
Yeah.
Or am I inventing that?
Yeah, it should come, well, about where your feet are, actually.
I think that's fantastic. Oh, it's quite made my day.
So early?
Dry stone wall before the first cup of tea. Dig on.
Maybe Francis should swap the tea for something stronger, because this is a stunning find. The Normans didn't build dry stone walls. It's Irish and could be the remains of a cashel, a circular walled enclosure. To be sure, Tracy needs to expose more and date it. Whatever this was may well have been flattened when John de Courcy took over this area in the 12th century. But while the Irish outnumbered his attacking forces, they were fighting a losing battle. To find out why, Time Team's Matt Williams has volunteered to step into 12th century Irish shoes. And given a choice between a woolen suit, stylish though it is, and Norman chainmail, I know which I'd go for.
Matt, how do you feel? Now you're fully kitted out as an Irish fighter.
Well, fully kitted out, I feel a bit underdressed next to Mark. I mean, straight away, the thing that I notice immediately is he's got all the metal that he's got on him. He's got chainmail, his shield is 3 times the size of mine, he's got a sword and a dagger. He's a full-on battleship, and I'm just a little sailing boat in the sea.
Basically, you've got farming implements, a throwing axe, and a shield the size of a pizza.
OK, so here we are. I'm going to give you a quick 12th century lesson on, well, you're going to die most of the time.
So I'd come running at you.
OK, that's a mistake, because I'm going to step in, block your shield, and then take your head off.
How about if I went down like that?
Drop the shield, and now, look, my point is now under your guard.
What if I go down like that?
That's it. I'm going to block there, or if we're feeling being very nasty, step back and just take the arm. Do a high one coming down this way. OK, I'm going to block, smack you in the face with my shield.
Yeah.
A kick, knock that out of the way, and then slice the face. So are you feeling slightly less confident now?
Right, I'm trying to think of another way. What if I just go at you with my shield like that?
Well, mine's bigger than yours. I'm going to come over the top with the pommel.
Yeah.
I'm going to put all my weight and hopefully get you going backwards. Once you stumble and fall, the point of my sword is going to follow you down to the ground, and I'm going to impale you as soon as you hit the ground. There are certain things you could do, but definitely the weight is against you. I certainly wouldn't want to be in your shoes.
Even against spirited defence, the mightiest arm in England had the military edge, man against man. But did his building match his fighting? We're starting to doubt that what you see today was what you saw in de Courcy's time.
Over there, there's a stretch of wall which doesn't make sense because it's double skinned.
I know what you mean. You've got this wall here, haven't you? And then suddenly it gets incredibly thick for a few metres and then goes back to its original depth there. What's that all about, Colm?
Well, it's possible what you're looking at is the remains of maybe the hall associated with de Courcy's occupation of the castle.
I see. So this thick bit would be the wall adjacent to the outer wall, and then the whole thing would stick out like this.
And here.
Any other clues?
Well, yes, Tony. There's a particularly strange bit, but it's hidden around the back of the tower.
I know what you mean. Come in this direction. It's so funny, isn't it? Because we virtually ignored this part of the castle completely on day one, and suddenly it becomes not only really important, but highly contentious. This little thing here, which looks to me rather like the inset for a Norman television set. What actually is it, Francis?
That, Tony, is a medieval toilet. It's known as a garderobe, OK? And people would have sat up at that level and done their business outside the house.
This would be part of a building, and there is no building here now, but what we have is this. So this is later than the latrine, and there was a building here which was demolished.
That's what archaeology is all about. It is fascinating, isn't it? Normans on their loo, reading their Norman newspapers. Fantastic. Colm's detective work has paid off. He's worked out that de Courcy built a stone hall, complete with latrine, where the round tower now stands. He also put up a hall here, now disappeared. And that's not all. Based on the architecture of the round keep and gatehouse, Colm's convinced they're both 13th century. He thinks they were put up by the rival Norman knight who turned up to spoil de Courcy's party. Hugh de Lacy was sent by King John to depose de Courcy, whose control of the region amounted to treason. But ousting him from the castle he'd controlled for 25 years was no mean feat.
It took de Lacy about 5 years, and he finally managed to capture de Courcy in 1204. And there's a very good description of that in a later source. It says that John de Courcy wore his armour all year round, except for on Good Friday when he went into the church. De Lacy burst in, de Courcy grabbed a crucifix, defended himself, killed 13 of de Lacy's soldiers and was finally captured.
I have no idea whether that was true or not. It was a great story, isn't it? De Courcy was toppled and de Lacy assumed control of Dundrum well into the 13th century. It seems hardly any of what's here today was built by de Courcy, so it's his original castle that we're looking for in our trenches. And Phil's got a hint of exactly that, what could be the earliest Norman structure on site, some kind of defensive bank.
It almost looks as though this dark stuff is part of the bank, really, doesn't it?
But Rakshaw's trench is full of medieval rubble. So while we know it wasn't on bedrock, it's not over an intact building either. Undeterred, Colm and Francis are embarking on their own search for de Courcy's castle.
You go first.
Thanks, Colm.
Under the keep, which replaced his earlier hall, is a rock-carved cistern, 23 feet deep, dug into the natural water table.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. It's a bit good, isn't it, Colm?
It certainly is. I mean, it's Anglo-Norman engineering at its finest, doesn't it? I would imagine that's the reason why the keep is constructed at this spot. They knew there was a source of water here, and therefore they exploited that, because that's one of the things that they really want for the castle would be a source of water in case there was a siege.
Yeah. I mean, there must be thousands of gallons down there.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
This cistern held enough water to service the entire castle, which probably once had things like a chapel and stables. Now they've finished surveying the upper courtyard. Fingers crossed, some of these might show up on the Geophys.
John, these are incredibly spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a whole complex of features. Let's just narrow it down.
Okay.
I think the things of real interest are these responses here. They look like walls.
Yeah.
They look like a large building. Now, before you get too excited, it's just possible that that's showing the natural bedding in the geology.
Yeah.
But if it's not the natural bedding, then we could have a big structure there.
There are two possible corners there. Which one would you favour if we were going to put a trench on it?
So you're saying it's a building already, aren't you?
Well, I think it is.
Two corners.
Yes.
Two corners to the bedrock.
Yeah.
OK, let's go for that.
What's interesting is when you look over here at the keep, you can see this little opening. And it's thought that that might be a means of bringing water from the cistern inside the keep, bringing it out to here. And if you had your stables here, well, it would be a means of bringing the water to the horses.
So we've gone from possible bedrock to this being reconstructed as stables with water supply coming in.
Sounds plausible.
Fantastic. Prove it in the ground.
We will, John. You wait.
The gauntlet's been thrown to Time Team's Cassie Newland to get the fourth trench up and running. What we're still lacking in our trenches are any actual buildings and any tight dates. So no pressure. It's lunchtime day 2, and Francis, frankly, the archaeology is even slower than the lunch queue.
No, it isn't, Tony. The archaeology is fabulous. We've opened new trenches.
Oh, we've opened new trenches, but what are the point of new trenches if you don't find anything?
We found, what about that dry stone wall? You could eat your lunch off it, it's gorgeous.
Can you guarantee to me that this afternoon we'll find out more about the story of the castle?
Yes, Tony, absolutely. We'll find out a huge amount about it.
Go on.
All the histories.
There is a burning question still, though.
What's that, Tony?
Chips on mash.
Thanks a lot.
It's chips every time. Chips, please. Afternoon, day 2, and just before lunch we put in this trench here because we thought that there might be an ancient castle building here. Cassie, it does seem we've got a load of rubble, doesn't it?
Ah, well, I think it's probably collapsed, which is better than rubble.
Before lunch we were positing that this could be a stables.
Yeah.
Does that sort of read well for you?
Well, we've not had a lot of stably evidence out.
Yeah.
We do have one really nice thing.
Go on.
Shiny thing.
Suddenly we burst into song.
Time to the musical.
Does this justify the singing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's what we call a roof finial. It's a piece of decorative roof furniture.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing you'd find on the edge of the ridge over at the eave on a really nice posh building.
You just said really posh building,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
does that undermine this notion that it was a stable or
Well, it
something?
depends how posh your stables are.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose.
I mean, these things sort of turn up on the roofs of priories and big grand houses and that sort of thing, and castles, I suppose, as well. This one was made in Bristol. It's posh.
It's so fascinating when he says that kind of thing. How do you know it was made in Bristol? I can't see a Bristol City FC mark on it anywhere.
As ever, it's the fabric, dark grey with buff surfaces, lead glaze, classic ham green, just outside Bristol.
What sort of date?
Well, late 12th to mid-13th, something like that, so right on the money for the construction of the castle.
Great, great. Well, it looks as though we may well be on the money in this trench then. Well done, great, keep digging. The date of this rare roof finial means it's the first find we can tie to de Courcy's original castle. Over in his trench, Phil's confident he's found something else belonging to de Courcy, the first Norman defence on this hill.
Francis!
And he's itching to share the news.
Hey, Francis!
Give me a chance, Phil.
Ah!
Crikey.
You've been ignoring me all day.
No, I haven't, Phil. I've been busy. And so have you. What have you found?
Well, we got the bank. I thought you'd want to come and see the bank. It's running up, right up here, running right over, and it's running back down there. I think that's quite a substantial bank.
I think that's a fantastic bank, Phil. I mean, one of the things that strikes me about it, it actually looks far better constructed, you know, with big lumps of masonry down there. Is that what you think?
Well, I mean, there's the bank itself, which is all this really big stony, this big rubbly stuff which comes up and over there and actually is going down there. And look at the size of these big stones. They're really solid. And I mean, you don't know. I mean, if it was a defensive bank, it might have had a palisade on it. And of course, you don't know how much of it. It might have been chopped off when they actually put the stone wall up.
And I mean, do you have a date now for this curtain wall?
Well, the only thing I can date at the moment is the surface where my hand is here. Now, this is the courtyard surface, and that has got 13th, 14th century pottery on it. So, this wall must be 13th or 14th century in date, or more likely a lot earlier, because this courtyard surface laps up against it.
I mean, that's extraordinary. That's not bad for a beginner.
Thank you, Francis. I won't call you in next time.
Phil's impressive discovery that the wall is at least 13th century means it was almost certainly built by de Courcy. But before he put up this imposing stone defence, it seems his stopgap was a substantial earth and boulder bank. It was a period we call the campaign phase, a time when he was wresting control of the area and fighting the indigenous Irish. Step up Matt, round 2, target practice.
This is actually how we would have been against each other then. Yes. Myself with this bow.
Yes. And the big difference here is you'd have been shooting arrows at him and they'd have been bouncing off him, whereas he'd have been shooting his arrows at you and they would have gone through you.
And into the guy behind me.
The weight of the bow that he's using would certainly drive the shaft sufficiently through you to be coming right out your back. Yeah.
As skilled hunters, The Irish arrows were perfect for killing animals,
I can't believe how difficult this one is to pull back.
but useless against chain mail.
Oh.
The Normans were better equipped. Their needle bodkin arrows were long, thin, and ripped through anything. We're going to measure precisely how far each bow could fire. The Irish bow was made from yew and measured 3'6".
Oh!
67.5.
So normal pullback.
The Normans
45 degrees
had
up.
bows which were between 5 and 6 feet long.
.3 metres.
The superior range of Norman bows successfully held the Irish at bay, backed up by imposing defences. Stuart and Time Team surveyor Emma Wood have been using laser images called LiDAR to peer beneath the vegetation at the scale of John de Courcy's castle fortifications.
This is the LiDAR data actually showing all the tree coverage and everything, which we can't really see much underneath, so we can strip that off and have the model like here.
Now that looks very different, doesn't it? Indeed.
Wow, brilliant. Fantastic.
Isn't that incredible? You can see these features round here. These are those pictures. Great sort of defence on the top of the hill.
They're really, really deep. OK, so, I mean, what are you proposing to do now?
I think, what we're going to need to do is take some measurements to show just precisely what's going on in terms of where ditch bottoms might be, ditch tops and so on.
But, no, I think that's fantastic. Great stuff. Yeah.
A massive series of ditches encircle the castle's outer walls. Stuart now needs to measure them and work out how they were built. And no hard feelings, Stuart, but while you're off fertling in the bushes, we're all off to enjoy some Irish hospitality. They waxed these heads and then brought them over. Let's face it, it doesn't take much persuasion to get them to a pub.
Do you know the way to the pub?
No, we're going to the pub.
Right, thank the Lord for that.
What kind of day has it been for you, Con?
It's been a great day. The weather stayed good, and we opened up that trench over the stone feature.
That's the mysterious thing that could be the earliest building on the site.
Absolutely, that could be the origin point for the whole site.
And you've got the posh house.
Well, I've got a posh roof. We're hoping for posh house, but there's just that last little bit to machine away in the corner.
You've had a good time, haven't you?
I mean, we've shifted a lot of muck today, but it's been worth it. It's been worth it. But I'm sitting here now, and I'm actually in a bit of a shock, because apparently when the Anglo-Normans was about, the English were noted as being heavy drinkers.
Yes.
And the Irish were noted for their sobriety.
And your point is?
What I also learned was there was this lovely phrase, and it said, "The grain mixed with water cheers the mind and makes for joyful company." So we've got the grain and the water. Let's have some joyful company.
And let's hope tomorrow we have some joyful archaeology. It's our final day at Dundrum Castle in Northern Ireland, and the entire team are blowing away last night's cobwebs with some heavy-duty digging. Not only are we unearthing the story of Irish occupation on this hill over 1,000 years ago, we're also piecing together what Norman knight John de Courcy put up when he arrived in the 12th century. We were hoping to find John de Courcy's castle in this trench here, which Cassie opened yesterday afternoon, but frankly, that just looks like a load of old rubble to me.
There is quite a lot of rubble, yeah. No castle here, not yet.
So we haven't got the original Norman castle yet, but maybe we're close to it.
Well, we'll have a look. We'll do our very best.
But what's getting us particularly excited is the other end of the trench. We extended it hoping for more castle, but instead we've unearthed more Cashel. Cashel always confuses me because it sounds so much like castle, but it's not that at all.
No, it's not. An earlier thing. It's the period from about the 7th century to the 10th century. It's a stone-walled enclosure.
And what we think might be the outside of the Cashel is here where Rackshar is excavating. How does this look on the geophys, Francis?
Well, it looks rather spectacular, Tony. You've got this huge circular spread of nothing.
This is the Holy Grail, isn't it?
Yes.
If we can establish that this is a cashel, everyone's going to remember this archaeology.
Yeah, I would be extremely happy, Tony. I would be. So that's why I'm extending this trench.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bridge off here.
Yeah.
And then come back like that for about 3 metres.
So I'd be in the middle of the cashel now if it is a cashel.
Yes.
And then over here?
And over here, I'm going to extend Tracy's trench here to come towards to meet it. Eventually, we may decide to join the two up. I don't think that'll be necessary.
Because the other side of the cashel would be this gorgeous bit of stonework here that Tracy's been excavating.
You've got it, Tony. Now we've exposed it fully. It is drop-dead gorgeous dry stone walling. It is stunning. I've done a bit of dry stone walling in my life, and I couldn't begin to do that. That's classy stuff.
So this really is starting to get exciting, isn't it?
It's looking smashing.
So with 1 day to go, and with the blessing of our Irish partners, we're pushing our trench allowance to its limit by making these trenches even bigger. It's the only way to prove whether the wall continues in a circle and is indeed a cashel. Because elsewhere, some cashels have turned out to be the strongholds of Irish kings. So Colin's taking me into the countryside to check out an intact example. On so many time teams, we say we're going to see how far back in time we can go to the earliest evidence on the site. And it's very hard to do that. Mostly it's disappeared. 10 miles from Dundrum is Drina Cashel, over 1,000 years old. So this is it, along here?
Yeah, there's your outer bank of stone.
Dry stone, like our one?
All dry stone, the same way. You can see why we were all getting excited about dry stone.
How tall do you think it would have been originally?
Well, it was probably, I would say, about another metre in height at least.
The one thing that strikes me is how big it is.
It is very big. It's basically a defended farmstead because you've got the threat of people steal the cattle, and also you have to remember that in Ireland at this time you got wolves.
Cool, look at this here. This is intriguing. Colin, what's this?
It's a defensive feature. It's like an artificial cave.
Yeah.
And what would happen if there was a raid? The people who lived down here, they would go under the ground, and there's a cavern for them to take protection in.
Many Irish chiefs and their families would have lived in these enclosures when the Normans arrived in the 12th century. And they had two choices: fight or flee. Unfortunately, we're not giving Matt the option of fleeing, as he takes on the fight of his life. Round 3, man versus horse.
This is the Norman saddle, and this is really the key to how they managed to beat the Irish. It's very, very solid. It's got a very high back, and they have stirrups. And you can only couch a lance, which means holding it under your arm and bracing against the back of your saddle, obviously, if you have a saddle and stirrups to push against. You can imagine what it would be feeling like going up against that. And all the heavily armoured might of the heavy horse, with his long lance, longer than your little javelins, and of course his very sharp sword. And you could expect to have this sort of treatment.
Matt, I'm so glad that you're doing this and not me. What exactly is it that you've got to perform?
Well, I've got to face up to the horse and rider with the spear and all the armaments that he's got. And once again, I appear to be at a severe disadvantage. The main one being I'm only on foot, and I'm probably going to chuck all my things at it, all my spears at him, and they're just going to bounce off.
Is he gutsy? Does he know what to do?
His courage will bear him through.
Your courage? Is that what we've got to rely on?
That's all I'm going to have left, I think. Yeah.
Right, take your spears then. Only a fraction of the Irish would have fought on horseback. Most were on foot. The back foot. Well, that's pretty conclusive. The Normans' superior weapons and cavalry left countless Irish dead. Others took refuge in nearby towns, and those who survived were subject to de Courcy's control. Rubbing salt in their wounds, he then built his castle on top of their stronghold.
Oh, hi, Colin. Good to have you back.
You've been working?
I have.
What we thought this morning was a fortified cashel is now looking rather more intriguing.
I wonder, are we looking at actually a building?
That's my gut
I think we're looking actually at some sort of building up here. Is it a hall? Maybe
really?
You're looking, well, possibly you could be looking at a hall. It's possible that what you had was a big structure which was roofed over the entire thing.
I mean, this has to be important, doesn't it? The very, very top of the hill.
Very important. You're dealing with a high status settlement up here on the hilltop.
This is a real revelation. The curved dry stone is too well built to be an enclosure. It seems to be the platform for a substantial round building. But little is known about Ireland before the Normans. We do know the country was split into 150 kingdoms, or tuas. Tribal leaders ruled their people from fortified strongholds and were celebrated for their bravery and heroism. And at Dundrum, there's one local legend that survives.
The first mention of Dundrum is in about 800 in a story dealing with the building of a big feasting hall. And it refers to a feast that was organised by a character called Bricrew. And it was attended by all the heroes of Ulster, and they spent a long time feasting, telling about their exploits.
According to Irish mythology, Bricrew was a lord, poet and troublemaker who once lived here. Incredibly, it looks like we might be onto his renowned feasting hall. We've got some feasting debris in the shape of butchered animal bone. And just on the other side of the site, Phil's got something we can date. He's unearthed an early ground surface where someone dropped something pretty special.
It's a gorgeous bone pin. You can see it's been really, really nicely shaped. And you can see this lovely little hole in the end. There's a strong view that it could actually be early Christian. In other words, that it is much, much earlier than the stone keep and actually relate to the first people who used this site.
This beautiful clothing pin is definitely pre-Norman and proof the Irish were living here as far back as the 9th or 10th century. As for our Norman story, Cass's trench has drawn a big fat blank. Demolition has obliterated any clues as to what this building once was. Luckily, Stuart has found some spectacular evidence of the Normans' engineering skills outside the castle walls.
Come and have a look up here. First of all, this bank we're standing on top of, you can see the slope down there.
That's very steep,
isn't it? It is, and this slope down here is the first bank up. We're standing on top of it. You've got to imagine there'd be a palisade on top of here as well. It wouldn't be like this. Then you come down into what would be the ditch behind it, which is partially filled in. You can see this dip we're in now. And then you see we're climbing up again, up here.
Is this still de Courcy, do you think?
This is still de Courcy. And then there's another ditch.
Yeah.
And you look at this one. It's actually, don't fall down, because it is actually vertical there.
Blimey, it is, isn't it?
We're in a rock cut ditch now.
Wow.
Which is different to that one.
Yeah.
And if you come to the other side of it, up to this face here.
Up again.
And you see it's another rock cut edge.
Look at this here. Yeah. Wow, yeah. These defences were dug deep into solid rock. Back-breaking work and a sign the Normans were here to stay.
You see where they've cut it away later on.
But at the front of the castle, there's no sign of any defences. And Stuart's worked out why.
All we've got left of that inner ditch, the rock-cut ditch that we saw, you can see the rock-cut face in there?
Oh,
that's all
yeah,
that's
yeah.
left, and you can trace it all the way around. Now, what's happened at a later stage, probably in the 17th century, when this big house below us is having its gardens built, they're getting rid of all this big bank and ditch and everything here that's in the way.
To create lovely gardens.
Absolutely. And that's not just a bright idea. We can actually demonstrate it through data which we've taken from the LiDAR. Critical one.
Through accurate measurements across the site, Stuart's proved that the ground's been completely removed on this side. And that's not all. He's still got his trump card to play.
Go on, shove your hand up. See what happens.
Oh, there's nothing there at all. It's a complete void. Is it a chimney?
No, I think it's the bottom of a guard rod chute, you know, a toilet drain, effectively.
Thank you for making me put my hand up it.
But what's interesting about that is there's no evidence of building. Going with this, if you look on the other side of the wall, it's blank. I'm wondering if what we've got right at the end is a tower.
Stuart's discovery of a second toilet chute on the other side of the castle means there must have been a tower to contain it, probably the original gate tower. We've finally got all the elements of this impressive castle. It started with a circuit of substantial banks and ditches around this hill. On top was a huge circular bank. Next, the curtain wall and gate tower. And within the courtyard, 2 halls and stables. But it's the earlier Irish part of the story that's really created a buzz and attracted the attention of some of Ireland's top archaeological brass.
What we found is the very summit of this hill, and surrounding it in a great circle, like a crown, were the foundations of a great hall. And this would have been the dwelling place of the tribal chiefdom. This was the reason why this later castle was built. This had always been an important place.
Isn't that interesting? Because the very first reference to Dundrum is of a big hall where people came for feasting.
Yeah, it's a real gem of a discovery on a beautiful site.
Archaeology has given us a glimpse of a time we know so little about, proving 1,200 years ago this hilltop was an Irish seat of power. Remind me again, what's the Irish for cheers?
Sláinte.
Sláinte. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've only got one word to say, which is... Sláinte!